Vallow. Let's get you into court now for the start of the state's closing argument.
July 2019, just 7 days after this defendant and her co-conspirator Alex Cox shot and killed Charles. This defendant texted her soon-to-be next husband, Chad Daybell, about Charles's life insurance policy. Her words tell us that she was involved in this killing. Her actions and her words of texting Chad Daybell tell us the motives behind this murder: Chad and money. The morning of that 18th of July, Lori Vallow texted Chad and said, quote, "I just got the letter from the insurance company saying that I am not the beneficiary. It's a spear through my heart. Who do you think he changed it to?" Later that day, after she spoke with the life insurance company, she sent Chad another text. Quote, "So I talked to the insurance company. He changed it in March. Probably it was Ned before we got rid of him." Lori Vallow's words 7 days after Charles was shot and killed tells us that we was her and Alex killing Charles. Why? For that money. But Lori Vallow's plan to kill Charles wasn't just known by her lover, Chad Daybell, and her accomplice and co-conspirator, Alex Cox. It was also known by her brother, Adam. Adam told us that he knew about Lori's beliefs. He knew what she had been saying about Charles's concerns for himself. And he told us that he knew about this plan for an intervention, to talk to a stakeholder. That morning of July 11th, when Charles arrived at Lori's house, as she knew he would, he texted Adam and said, "Al is here." Adam texted back, "They are planning something." He knew. And 3 days later, on Saturday, when Adam finally learned, when his friend Googled Charles, that he had been shot and killed by Alex, Adam told us he went back and talked to his mother, and he confronted her about this. And he told his mother, Lori and Alex conspired to kill Charles. He knew, and he was right. Lori's ex-friend, Treena Kay, she told you about that very uncomfortable dinner on June 9th, a month before the murder, where Alex Cox was talking about just wanting to kill Charles. He said this multiple times, and this defendant didn't care. In fact, she talked about how she had been drugging Charles. Treena told you she was so disturbed by this, she actually went and saw Lori the next day, June 10th, and told her, "If something happens to Charles, I'm going to have to go to the police." Treena knew. She was right. And Nancy Jo Hancock, now she had just met Charles a few days before, and they had talked and texted and had been on the phone for hours, you heard. Charles had told her all about Lori, the things she was saying, the things she was doing. She told you that she knew that Charles was concerned for his own safety. And she understood the motive. She told Charles the night before, "You probably should just tell Lori that you've changed the beneficiary, that she's no longer going to get that money." Nancy Jo knew, and she was right. Lori Vallow wanted the $1 million, and she wanted Chad Daybell. And she and Alex used that twisted religious beliefs they had so that they could kill the evil, possessed Charles and be like Nephi. The evidence that has been presented in this trial will prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that this defendant is guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. So I want to split up my closing into 3 sections. First, I'm going to talk to you about the timeline and the motives in this case and the evidence that supports those. Second, I want to talk to you about the jury instructions and the evidence that's been presented to you in court. I'll remind you that anything the defendant said in her opening was not presented at trial through a witness or through an exhibit, and it is not evidence. Using the evidence that has been presented and admitted at trial, the state will show you how, again, the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of this crime. And finally, I'm going to talk to you about those justification defenses, the excuses and the reasons why the defendant would like you to believe that they had a valid basis for shooting and killing Charles on July 11th. And we'll talk about how, in fact, there is no justification for what they happened. What happened that morning was a first-degree premeditated execution of Charles Vallow. So let's go through the evidence. The timeline really starts, and we know it goes back much further than this, but the big change occurs on June 29th or 30th, when you learned that Charles Vallow learned about these KK Walker emails. He learned about that affair with Chad. Now he knows Lori is cheating on him. We know that he contacted Chad Daybell about it. He contacted Chad's wife about this. He told Adam about it, and he told the defendant about it. So everyone knew that Charles now knew this. July 9th is now the first time that Charles is going to be coming back to Arizona. We know from the time he learned about that affair, he hadn't been back until this planned visit to see his son, JJ. We know at 1:13 p.m., Charles texts Adam and books him a flight for the next day.
All right, the state's opening statement. You can hear how she started off the motive, Chad Daybell, and the money, and then saying after she talked about some of the evidence, this was first-degree premeditated execution of Charles Vallow. We're going to pause it there. We're going to take a break. When we come back, of course, we'll get back in for more of the closing argument. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Judge Ashley Wilcott. Thanks for joining us. We are watching the cult mom conspiracy trial in Arizona, where the defendant, Lori Daybell, is accused in the 2019 murder of her estranged husband, Charles Vallow. The state says that money and Lori's new romance with Chad Daybell gave her motive to kill, although Lori claims that Charles's death was a tragedy, not malice. Right now, we are listening to the state's closing argument. We hit the pause button. Let's go right back in where we left off.
Adam is contacting Alex, and they talk for 20 minutes. And Alex lets Adam know, sure, you can stay with me. Of course, Alex doesn't know the plan yet, the mission. Lori then starts talking to Chad Daybell. We know that she knows about this intervention. She knows about Adam coming, and we know this because, again, of her text messages. We see Lori then starting to round up the troops. Why does she do this? Because she wants to ensure that on July 11th, it is Charles and only Charles coming to the house and not the intervention of Adam or Brandon or Zach coming over to help him. So she has Melanie. Tells her she can't go to this wedding. She has to stay here. It's coming to a head. This week will change everything. Call me. Then we have July 9th, the text messages with Alex. She tells him, so the plot thickens, call me when you can. He doesn't call her initially. So she sends him another message, this one really letting him know. She specifically tells him, I'm going to need you to stay close to me the next couple days. Mel, too, she can't go to Utah. She's got a job. They are planning some kind of intervention, but want Mel out of the way, so I'm left alone. She talks, I need to come get the stuff at your house tomorrow and secure it. Lots to do. Thank you for standing by me. It's all coming to a head this week. I will be like Nephi, I am told, and so will you. And then what happens? This gets Alex to call, and they talk for almost an hour. An hour planning how they're going to stop the intervention, how they're going to be like Nephi. As we get to the 10th of July, and we continue through this timeline, we see Lori again talking religiously with Chad. 149 minutes that morning. She's also texting Melanie Boudreau, Melanie B, telling her that it's important for the mission, for Melanie to help her by keeping Brandon distracted. And we saw those messages where Melanie says she'll pretend to be sick. We know that on the 10th, Adam arrives in Phoenix. And now we have Summer helping the defendant, letting her know what is going on with Adam and Zach. Everyone is covered to ensure that Charles will be alone on the 11th. We have the continuing talks with Chad, her soon-to-be husband. As we get into the 10th in the afternoon, we know that per their agreement, Adam calls his brother Alex. Hey, I'm here. Brother doesn't answer. He sends him a text. I'm here. No response. Why? Because the night before, his sister Lori told him, we have a mission. We must be like Nephi. Charles is coming into town. You must stay at my house the night of the 10th so you can be here the morning of the 11th. We also know that Summer gave Lori an out. Hey, you can stay at my house. No one will know where you are. We're going to be out of town. You can hang out here. Lori doesn't take her up on that. She has a mission to do. As the night grows on the 10th, Adam continues to try to reach his brother Alex. Again, no response. And by 45 or so minutes after that last text by Adam, we know Alex is already at Lori's house. He's there with his gun and a garbage bag of some underwear. Why? That gun is important. A loaded weapon, 2 extra magazines of ammunition with him. He is ready for his mission. And again, Summer is updating her, telling Lori that Zach and Adam are still at her house. They're going to go stay at Mimi's. And she even tells him that Adam is still waiting for Alex to get back to him. Still, he doesn't understand. Why isn't my brother responding to me? I was supposed to stay there. And again, what does Adam bring over? Gun and a garbage bag of clothes. That's all he needs to be part of the mission. When we get to July 11th, we still have Lori talking with Chad. We see those text messages going back between them. And then we start learning from the GPS from Charles Vallow's phone as he arrives. 7:35 a.m., he arrives at 5531 South Four Peaks. That's where we have at 7:36, Adam texting Charles. They are planning something. There is no
Still with us, criminal defense attorneys Josh Schiffer, Jack Rice. I don't know, gentlemen. Josh, I'm going to start with you. I'm listening to these details, these texts from Lori to Alex, the testimony that was presented, but I haven't heard anything yet that's a smoking gun, so to speak. Thank you for standing by to me, she says to her brother. Everything's coming to a head this week. Charles is coming to town. You must stay at my house the night of the 10th, so you're there on the 11th. Okay, maybe she's afraid of Charles. Okay, there are lots of reasons she may want her brother there, but Josh, I don't really know that it's enough to prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, conspiracy to commit a murder.
Well, it's not at this exact moment of the storytelling, but it's coming, because this is the foreshadowing, and this is the engaging the jury that you're going to really want to do as the state. And I really like this prosecutor's presentation, considering the unknowns that she's facing. For all we know, Lori Daybell is going to come out, and we're finally going to hear some of what a number of people were kind of expecting from her participation in this trial as her own lawyer. It's got kind of some theater and some show, but right now the state is setting up the table. All of this mission stuff, that mission is what makes it a conspiracy, and the state's going to drive that point home.
All right, so I'm going to push back a little bit, Josh, because I too would love to see the Lori that maybe we've all expected to see, that quite frankly we really haven't seen. She's been pretty spirited when the jury's not in and she has arguments to make to the judge. Absent that, Jack, she's been fairly, really professional, articulate, not out of control at all with the court. I thought she'd testify. She didn't. I don't know that I expect her to be really spirited in the closings. In fact, I'm not convinced she's going to do a lot in the closing, but what are your thoughts?
Well, we all expected more, frankly. We all expected her to testify. If we think about what it is that they're arguing, what it is that it means, I would have expected to see that. And the fact that we've seen none of that in front of this jury from the beginning of the case, throughout the case in chief for the state, anywhere, and then obviously really not putting on a defense at all, you're not expected to see that during closings. And yet there's still one piece of this that I think is important to remember. If we can establish that this was self-defense with Alex, just that piece alone, the conspiracy issue is irrelevant. You can toss out every piece of evidence that the state has about a text message, about we're going to be together, about how we're going to work on this and how this is an important week. None of that's relevant if what you can establish is a legitimate self-defense claim on the ground on that day, on the 19th. It doesn't matter what they were planning regardless, because that would negate the prosecution's case from beginning to end.
You are right. If that jury believes it was self-defense, that's it, Josh. You know, I'd love to. I know, Josh, but we can't. We're out of time.
Don't let him talk.
But Jack's entirely right. By stripping it all away, by stripping away everything, this may be the pathway for Lori Daybell to go, hey, they haven't proved anything. Can we all leave?
You're right, and it may be that short. He did say you were right. I just wanted to repeat that for you, Jack. All right, stand by, both of you. Lori, I mean, we're pausing it so we get to see all those closing arguments. That's up after the break. But also to let you know, the jury in the Jose Morales case in Connecticut has gone home for the day. They deliberated for about 25 minutes. The court said at 4:30 we're going to stop. Those deliberations resuming tomorrow. We'll be right back.
Is Karen Reed a killer girlfriend?
She's guilty.
Or the scapegoat in an elaborate cover-up?
Karen Reed was raped! We know who did it.
The Karen Reed murder retrial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, Lori Daybell delivers her closing argument in the cult mom murder conspiracy trial. We're live with every development as deliberations get underway.
Closing Arguments tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
Now back to Arizona for the cult mom conspiracy trial of Lori Daybell. She is representing herself against charges in connection to the murder of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. Let's go back into court right now. We are listening to the state's closing argument.
Out his last outgoing message. And at 7:37 and 29 seconds, there's an incoming message. from Adam. It's not read until 12:13 p.m. What becomes important here is, in this timeline, how long is Charles at the residence here? You hear in her interview how she says it's so fast. Charles comes inside. He's angry. He's jerky. And she tells him, take JJ. Go get him Burger King. They get JJ out to the car, and then she holds onto the phone. And this argument erupts, and it's just so fast. But what we know is it's actually 12 minutes long. This is not a fast incident. In this 12 minutes, Lori Vallow and her brother Alex Cox are doing their mission, and they are being like Nephi. We know at 7:49, it's over. Lori has left in Charles Vallow's car with his phone and JJ and Tylee. We know that there are 2 phone calls between Alex and this defendant after she leaves. As Charles is laying, dying or dead on the floor, 7:52, 8:06, they talk. 47 minutes passes before Alex calls 911. 47 minutes to stage the scene. The police are advised when they arrive that the shooting just occurred and that CPR was given. Why is that important? Because you heard even during the interviews, the police were trying to figure out this timeline. Didn't make sense. At 8:48, almost an hour later, Lori Vallow returns. And then we see that around 9:40, she is being interviewed at the Family Advocacy Center. We know that Lori Vallow has Charles's phone that entire afternoon. You saw the PowerPoint from Detective Werther showing that her phone by about 12:36 is already her phone, Alex's phone, and Charles's phone are all in the area of Alex's house out in Santan. You see on her records that she, again, calls Chad Daybell. We see that Detective Enclan calls her and leaves her a message. They don't leave immediately because what do we know? We know at 2:13, Alex is taking photos of Adam's flight reservations from Charles's phone. Not screenshots, but photos of the phone. At 2:18, Lori Vallow, who has not told Charles's kids, his family, about his murder, is calling the mortuary. A little bit after that, they still haven't left. She's calling Chad again. And then by 3:11, we know that Charles's phone, through the GPS data, is back at 5531 South Four Peaks. And when asked about it, the defendant and Tylee hand it over and provide the PIN. They have no problem on how to get into it. They've already looked through it. They don't.
Thank you to Jack Rice and Josh Schiffer for joining us. Up next, more closing arguments in the cult mom conspiracy trial for Lori Daybell. Stay right here on Court TV. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Judge Ashley Wilcott. Of course, honored to be with you. Court TV is tracking 3 big cases. In Connecticut, the jury goes home for the evening after a short day of deliberations in the missing daughter murdered mother trial of Jose Morales. In Massachusetts, opening statements are set to begin in the much anticipated retrial of accused killer Karen Reed. And in Arizona, closing arguments are underway in the cult mom conspiracy trial for Lori Daybell. Daybell does face another life in prison sentence if she is convicted of conspiring with her now deceased brother, Alex Cox, to kill her 4th husband, Charles Vallow. Cox told police he was defending himself when he shot Vallow back in July of 2019 after Vallow attacked him with a bat. A later investigation said no, the killing was murder. Cox was never charged because he died 5 months after the shooting. Daybell was left as the lone defendant, and she represented herself in the 7-day trial. She still represents herself as closing arguments have gotten underway. We want to take you back inside the courtroom where the prosecutor is delivering its final appeal to the jurors.
That evening, Lori and Chad are talking all night. You can look through the exhibits and see the multiple calls of them discussing. These aren't calls to Charles's family. They're not calls to his kids. They're talking with her lover, her soon-to-be husband, Chad Daybell. So let's talk about the motives of this case. Money. We see that from the text messages and the anger that you see through them when she learns that that's been changed and she's not going to get it. Chad Daybell. We didn't go through those text messages, but you can look at them. They are already very romantically involved by the time that Charles is murdered. And it's clear that Chad knows exactly what's going on because he's asking her about the car, about the insurance. All of those things Chad knows. And then there's that religious belief system. The zombies, the Z's, the possessed evil spirits. And her being like Nephi. All a reason and a way to kill someone, just like Nephi, a justified killing. There's that first call when we talk about money motive. To Banner Life Insurance.
And what was the cause of his passing? Well, he was shot. Okay, so I don't know how I want to put that. Okay, all right. And I hate to ask, but is it? Yeah, you can just say yes or no. Was it a homicide? No, it was an accident. An accident.
So what we hear here is Lori Vallow being untruthful to Banner Life Insurance. We'll talk about credibility later, but it becomes very relevant that even in the smallest of things, this defendant exaggerates, minimizes, and is completely untruthful to various people. We all know that she was not the beneficiary. She didn't. But we also know that Charles Vallow was not accidentally shot. She told the police she was there. She knows that her brother intentionally shot him. Of course, they want to claim it's self-defense. There's no accident about that when you shoot someone twice. Motives for money. What we see again here is Lori Daybell talking to Chad about the motive. Telling Chad about the fact that it was changed. I just got the letter from that insurance company saying I am not the beneficiary. It is a spear through my heart. Who do you think he changed it to? Brandon? Or probably Kay? He left nothing for JJ. What do we know? Again, we see that Chad knows about all of these things. And what does he talk about in that morning as you have those entire messages in Exhibit 230? It will be interesting if he got changed after he had 2 bullets to the chest. Again, as we talk about the murder, we have later in that day the message that I talked to you about. So it was probably Ned before we got rid of him. We, not I, not my brother Alex, but we did. And then the other thing in this text message that is of importance is the fact that Lori Vallow knew a month before she went to Social Security how much money she was already going to get for the death of Charles. Here she says, I will still get the $4,000 a month from Social Security. When we talk about that motive and the anger by this defendant over not being the beneficiary, we know that even on July 28th, so 10 days later, she goes into Charles's computer to find the change of beneficiary form. She texts that to Chad to show him, and she sends it to Kay and confronts her about it. Money. That's what she wanted. And Chad. So let's talk about Chad, the affair with Chad Daybell. We know that she knew him as far back as November of 2018 when he came to Arizona and stayed at Lori's house. You were told by Detective Duncan that there were recordings on her Lori for Style iCloud account of Chad Daybell here in Arizona for that Preparing the People conference. You also heard that in the Lolly time, the later account that was created later, that in March of 2019, there were screenshots of flights to Idaho and back to Arizona with both Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. This is during that time when she disappeared and Charles was taking care of JJ, and she's off flying to Hawaii and Idaho, living the good life with her soon-to-be husband. And then, of course, we know that come November 5th, she actually marries Chad Daybell. That KK Walker email address, this was that June 29th big change. What do we know? That on April 21st, she created that account. She used her own phone number in creating it. And then she sent messages to Chad Daybell, brother Daybell. You have that exhibit. She pretends to be Karen Walker and invites him to Houston, because that's where she is at that time. She offers to use Charles's money to fly him out there, and that he can stay at the house with her and her husband. In June of 2019, we see that Lori again uses that same account, but this time she pretends to be Charles and invites Chad out to Arizona to help him with a book. And again, in Exhibit 289, you have those letters. Charles finds those. And he lets everyone know he did. And he confronts Tammy, lets her know. Confronts Chad, lets him know. And he certainly lets the defendant know that he knows. And now, the jig is up. We see in these text messages that were recovered from the iCloud accounts, whether they're under the Bubby context or under the Melanie 2 contact, this relationship between Lori and Chad. If you want to read the story, it kind of mimics them meeting in November, hooking up in hotels, and discussing their love for each other. When we are talking about a motive and a person who wants money and who has not worked for 13 years, who has had her husband pay for her homes, her phones, her cars, allowing her to go to the temple and work out and go to lunch in restaurants. This is a big change in life if she loses all of this. But if she gets $1 million, it's not so big of a difference, along with that Social Security she'll be getting. And then obviously we know that once Charles was out of the way, Lori and Chad were able to get married. So what about those religious beliefs? Everyone that Lori knew, who she expressed them to, told you that they were not in line with the Church of Latter-day Saints. Everyone told you that she said things like she didn't need to repent She didn't need forgiveness. She could do whatever she wanted now. That she was in a celestial state, translated. That she is spiritually and physically changing. That she's above the priesthood. That she knew who was dark and evil. You saw those text messages, both about Charles and heard from people, as well as about Brandon and Zach and Adam. People who were helping Charles were also dark or Z's. And ultimately, what did we learn? That she associated herself with Nephi, a prophet, a holy man, who was justified and asked by God to kill Laban because he was an evil, wicked king who had the tablets that God wanted him to go get. Lori was just like that. She was justified in her killing. We heard from her brother, Adam, that their relationship had ended when she told him some things about her beliefs that he disagreed with. That she was turning into that celestial state, that she didn't need to eat, that she had more authority than the priesthood.
Yes.
You yourself personally, were you aware of Lori having outside?
We need to pause it right there for this update in the missing daughter murdered mother trial of Jose Morales. The jury has gone home for the day after deliberating for less than 30 minutes inside the state of Connecticut Superior Court. Morales is accused of beating his girlfriend Christine Holloway to death back in December of 2019. Her body was found in the bathtub in her home. The couple's one-year-old daughter, Vanessa Morales, was also missing and still has not been found. Morales is not charged in connection with his daughter Vanessa's disappearance. Today, the jury heard closing arguments from both sides before deliberations began.
The only conclusion that you can possibly make from the credible evidence is that on December the 1st of 2019, sometime after 2 a.m. and before 6 a.m., Jose Morales intentionally caused the death of Christine Holloway by striking her in the head not less than 8 times with an instrument that caused blunt force trauma, thereby causing her death. And thereafter, spending the next 36 plus hours systematically cleaning the crime scene in an attempt to erase all evidence and thereby existence of Christine Holloway.
Who calls 911 before committing a homicide? No one. And don't forget, that's Christine Holloway's voice in the background on the call. Christine was there. I want you to please respectfully ask yourself, why did the state try to hide the issue of PCP in this case? Why? PCP use clearly happened. Morales testified in regard to going to Bridgeport with Rodriguez, getting the PCP, having 2 bags of PCP with him, and his continued ingestion over the weekend. Morales had ingested PCP on December 1st. You can hear it in his voice. He was barely able to speak. Remember the testimony of Officer Jacqueline Tresser, who was assigned, that was the police officer that was assigned as the dispatcher. That's whose voice you hear. What do you hear? Her testimony. She said, voice slurred. No screaming or yelling between Jose and Christine. No physical violence, no confrontation whatsoever.
Jury deliberations resume tomorrow morning, and according to Connecticut's penal code, if Morales is convicted of murder, he faces between 25 and 60 years in prison. Let's take that break now. When we come back, we will, of course, get you back inside the Maricopa County Superior Courthouse for more of the state's closing argument in the case against Lori Daybell. Keep it here on your front row seat to justice.
Is Karen Reed a killer girlfriend?
She's guilty.
Or the scapegoat in an elaborate cover-up?
Karen Reed was framed. Karen Reed is accused of murdering her police officer boyfriend.
Defendant stated repeatedly, I hit him, I hit him.
She may end up taking the stand. Her first trial ended with a hung jury. They haven't proven anything.
Will a jury finally agree on a verdict? We know who did it.
The Karen Reed murder retrial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
We'll get you back inside that courtroom in just a moment. But first, I want to bring in our guest attorney, former prosecutor Tommy Pope. Tommy, always great to be on with you, especially in this case, because I have to tell you, I've been impressed with the prosecutor's closing argument, starting out with the motive, Chad and money, and then talking about the fact that Adam Cox, the brother of Lori, thinks that she did this, that she conspired with Alex. So did Woodcock about life insurance money, and then she gets into these text messages that Lori sent about, Alex, you have to be here on that night. You have to be there the next morning. And thank you so much for staying close to me the next couple of days. But at the end of the day, is it enough? Do you think so far this closing has convinced you, Tommy, that she absolutely conspired with Alex to commit a murder?
I think that the prosecution is put together tightly. I think we've talked numerous times now. The difficulty is all the potential witnesses, all the potential co-conspirators are deceased. And so it's a tough one in that regard to prove it. But I think circumstantially and in a strange way, the fact that she's represented herself, and it's kind of been, again, I've been very impressed with her representing herself. She just is missing the understanding of the rules and the law that could have made her case tighter. You've always heard that a lawyer who represents himself, you've heard it a number of times, got a fool for a client. I think in this circumstance, had she had an attorney, it would have been even tighter on her side, and I think those questions would pop up. But I believe the jury's going to have enough without her pulling it apart, without her really defending it, to come back with a verdict of guilt.
Yeah, and she's been very articulate in court, very professional, respectful. She hasn't done anything like we've sometimes seen pro se defendants do to really disrupt the court proceeding. All right, Tommy, stand by if you would, please. We do need to get back into court for more of the state's closing argument.
Lori having any beliefs that were outside of what is accepted by the LDS religion?
Yes.
Can you tell us what you were aware of that you knew to be outside the LDS religion?
Lori told me that she was in the process of translating from a mortal human being to an immortal human being, a celestial state.
That's something that the LDS religion supports?
I haven't heard of it and that it's happened here on Earth yet.
Serena Sharp told us about, again, the not repenting and Lori changing physically and spiritually.
Members of the LDS Church?
Yes.
During this time, did Lori ever tell you things about her beliefs that seemed to go against what you understood or what you were taught through the LDS Church?
Yes.
Did Lori ever tell you that she did not need to repent?
Yes, she did.
During this weekend, did Lori talk to you about her husband, Charles Vallow, being possessed?
Yes, she did.
What do you recall about her talking about her husband being possessed?
I recall that she spoke about her husband being possessed by an evil spirit, and she named the evil spirit.
Do you recall what the name was?
Yes.
What was it?
It was Ned.
N-E-D? Ned?
N-E-D.
Now, Serena Sharp was someone who met Lori in November, texted or talked with her for a while, and then was invited to that girls' weekend. One of the jury instructions you're looking at, and we'll talk about more, though, is the credibility of a witness. Serena Sharp has no dog in this fight. She knew Lori for a little while. She was invited to, I'll call it the inner circle. The defendant told her some things that went against her religious beliefs, and she said pretty much after that the defendant stopped talking to her. Now, how do we know she's being truthful? Well, we see Ned in lots of text messages. This just helps tell us that this is something Lori was telling lots of people, that her husband is possessed by this evil spirit, Ned. And we learn later that, like Nephi, she can get rid of him. Do you recall Lori Vallow telling you that her husband Charles was no longer Charles, that he was now this possessed person?
Yes.
When Lori was talking to you about Ned, was she explaining that this evil spirit was now in the body of her husband?
I don't know if she used those exact terms, but that was the impression I got, yes.
So the words she used expressed to you that idea that this evil spirit, Ned, was now in her husband's body?
Yes.
The other thing that Serena Sharp told us was Lori using that term zombie. You remember how upset the defendant got by her saying that. But again, why would Serena make up any of this? She has no reason to. What she recalls is that that is a term that this defendant used when speaking of people like her husband who were possessed by these evil spirits. We heard from Christina Atwood as well, the same concept that Lori Vallow repeatedly would say. Did she tell you, as well as the other women who were at this meeting in February, that her husband was possessed?
Yes.
Okay. So it wasn't just you in a private conversation?
Correct.
She was open about it?
Yes.
So again, we see this ongoing timing of Lori Vallow talking of her evil, dark husband, who she later is authorized under her religion to get rid of. We know as well from Christina Atwood that there is a progression of these beliefs becoming more deviated from the LDS religion as she is meeting with her between February and June when she finally hears those words. From the time you started meeting with these gatherings in February through to June, did you start to see sort of a progression of things that Lori was telling you that seemed outside of your faith?
Yes.
Did she make statements to you that you believed went against your religion?
Yes.
Did she at any point tell you that she did not need to repent anymore?
Yes.
What is that meaningful to you in your religion?
We believe that every single person outside of Jesus Christ has reason to repent.
Other than Lori Vallow, according to her words to multiple people. So let's take all of this, the motives and this timeline now, and talk about some of the jury instructions and all the evidence that supports proof beyond a reasonable doubt that this defendant is guilty.
We need to take a break, but we will get you back to more closing arguments when we return. You won't miss a thing. Also, the countdown is on as opening statements are set to begin tomorrow in the second trial of accused killer Karen Reed. Crime and Justice correspondent Matt Johnson will join us with a live update next. Keep it here on Court TV Live.
I'm Kelly Craft in Phoenix, Arizona, covering the cult mom conspiracy trial. You're watching Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcott. Thank you so much for joining us. We will, of course, get you back to court in just a moment. But first, we are getting you ready for opening statements in the Karen Read murder retrial. Openings begin tomorrow morning inside that courtroom in Dedham, Massachusetts. It will be the second time that Read is being tried for the murder of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. Crime and Justice correspondent Matt Johnson joining us now with a preview. Hello, Matt.
Yes, hi, Judge Ashley. It all comes down to this, the moment that many people have been waiting for, the much-anticipated retrial of Karen Read, taking place in the Dedham Courthouse here behind me. We're on the eve of openings, those opening statements tomorrow morning, and this defendant tells us she's ready.
How do you feel about Hank Brennan planning to use your interviews in his opening statement?
Come at me.
That's what your dad said.
You sound like your dad.
I may have seen it. I would not have said anything that I wouldn't say again.
See the 15-second clip that the prosecution plans to play?
I did.
What's it show?
Yeah, what is it?
Nothing that phases me in any way.
Can you tell us?
I don't think I can, no. I've been ready. I have no choice but to be ready. I feel strong. I've got an amazing team, and I'm anxious. I'm anxious, Jonathan. Yeah.
How much input do you have on the opening statement?
It's collaborative all the way around. Alan owns it, and he's always open to input and layers more of input, but it's ultimately Alan's, and Alan we all trust, but we've all given input.
Tomorrow's opening statements in the retrial for Karen Read, accused of killing her Boston police officer boyfriend, John O'Keefe. Take a look at your screen. Here is the jury going to be sworn in tomorrow. Jury of 18 have been seated to hear the case. That includes 9 men and 9 women. Opening statements will also look a lot different this time around. Last year, it was David Yannetti and Adam Lally who delivered those opening statements. This year, Alan Jackson and Special Prosecutor Hank Brennan will deliver the openings. Brennan also says that he plans to play a clip of Karen Read from one of her many TV interviews. And the court has ordered that the defense this time around cannot bring up a third-party culprit in openings. Brian Albert and Brian Higgins can be brought up during the course of the trial as third-party culprit if the court deems that it's allowed, but not Colin Albert. Here are some of the arguments about the defense case in chief during pretrial hearings. Take a listen.
The defense in this case has more evidence of third-party culprits than the defense did in Finney. We're not asking this court to allow into evidence hearsay, as was admissible in Finney. We're solely seeking to introduce the crux of a third-party culprit defense, which is evidence of motive, opportunity, and means, all of which Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, and Colin Albert had.
There is no motive. There is no motive. To suggest that one person was pining, although the text messages don't show that, they both stopped corresponding with each other days before. To suggest that Mr. Albert is friends with Mr. Higgins and therefore he is bootstrapped into a conspiracy to kill with no evidence. There is no opportunity to murder John O'Keefe when all the evidence points to him dying on the front lawn from an alleged collision.
Again, this all starts tomorrow at 9 a.m. here in Dedham, Massachusetts, just north of Boston. Court was dark today because of the Boston Marathon and also Patriots Day. Now, it's going to be Court TV cameras yet again in this courtroom, bringing you this trial for the duration of it. And also, there's only 10 media seats each and every day for members of the media that are selected through a randomizer process. And I have one of those coveted 10 seats this week, so I'll bring you all that exclusive content from inside the courtroom. So keep it right here. Judge Ashley.
Thank you so much, Matt Johnson. Can't wait to hear about the color of the courtroom, as always. Now let's head back to Arizona for the cult mom conspiracy trial of Lori Daybell. She's accused of conspiring with her brother Alex Cox to kill her 4th husband, Charles Vallow, back in July of 2019. Closing arguments are still underway. We've been pausing them to bring them to you in the entirety. Let's get back to court for more of the state's final plea to the jury.
I want to start with talking to you about direct and circumstantial evidence. You have a jury instruction that tells you that evidence may be direct or circumstantial, that direct evidence is the testimony of what a witness saw, heard, or otherwise sensed, and circumstantial evidence is proof of a fact or facts from which you may find another fact. You're told the law makes no distinction between direct and circumstantial evidence. And this is relevant. The witnesses have often been questioned. Did you see, hear, or do that? What you are told is you can actually use circumstantial evidence to convict anyone. But let me give you an example of this. Imagine you are sitting on a beach. Just you, it's quiet. Off to your right, there's some rocks and you can't see around that. While you're sitting there, a person walks by, you watch them walk by and they go around the rocks and you can't see them anymore. And then someone runs up 5 minutes later and they say, hey, did you see someone come by here? You say, well, yeah, I saw them walk that way. That is direct evidence. You saw it. Now imagine you're on that same beach and it's completely empty. You close your eyes for 5 minutes. Just relax. Before you closed your eyes, the beach was completely pristine. And when you open them up, now you see footprints. You can see the toes facing off to your right, the heels, and you see them go all the way around the rocks there. Somebody again runs up 5 minutes later and they say, hey, did someone come by here? And you go, well, I mean, I didn't see them, but they must have gone by in the last 5 minutes because you can see their footprints. They went that way. That is circumstantial evidence. You can infer from that that someone went by and where they went. The burden of proof. The state has the burden of proof, as we absolutely should. So let's talk a little bit about what it is and what it is not. You're told that the burden of proof is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And the instruction tells you that that leaves you firmly convinced in the defendant's guilt. You're told there are very few things in this world that we know with absolute certainty. And in criminal cases, the law does not require proof that overcomes every doubt. If, based on your consideration of the evidence, you are firmly convinced that the defendant is guilty of the crime charged, you must find him or her guilty. So I want to start by saying what proof beyond a reasonable doubt is not. It is not proof beyond all doubt. It is not proof beyond all conceivable doubt. It's not proof beyond all possible doubt, and it's not no doubt. You're told that there are very few things in life we know with absolute certainty. So just because someone says, what if? That is not a reasonable doubt. What you're told is it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. As we go through the evidence and apply it to the crimes, we'll show you that there is no reasonable doubt as to this defendant's guilt. So let's start with the crime itself. Conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. There are 3 stages in this, or 3 things the state must prove. 1, that the defendant or her co-conspirator caused the death of another person. Well, we know that Alex Cox shot and killed Charles on July 11th of 2019. Alex called 911.
Let's pause it there. The state does continue its closing argument on the other side of this break, so stay here with us on your front row seat to justice.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, Lori Daybell delivers her closing argument in the cult mom murder conspiracy trial. We're live with every development as deliberations get underway.
Closing Arguments, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
You told police you shot him twice in the head.
I could have killed everybody in that building, and I didn't.
You think you should get some kind of credit for not killing people?
Interview with a Killer. New episode, Sunday at 8 on Court TV.
The case against Lori Vallow Daybell continuing. The state still in its closing argument. Let's go back into court together.
The shooter was on the way home. It was his gun. His credit card or debit card was in there with the gun. And we know that Lori told the police that her brother killed Charles. So we know that he caused the death of, so that. 2, that they intended or knew that she or a co-conspirator would cause the death of another person. When we are looking at this case, we are looking at the defendant's words actions, and motive. The words and actions of having her brother Alex come over on the 10th with a gun so that he would be there when Charles came over to pick up JJ. The actions that day of taking Charles's phone, ensuring that he could not leave, that he could not take his son to school. The defendant told the detectives how angry and screaming Charles was about the phone, but she didn't just give it to him, throw it at him, tell him to get out, whatever you might do. She held onto it and told the police that she walked away with it as he's trying to grab it. The defendant's actions and words show us that she is the only reason why Charles stayed in there and the only reason why Charles was shot. Then there's those 12 minutes. Defendant tried to pretend that this was a quick, angry scuffle. But Charles is there for 12 minutes. The defendant is there for 12 minutes. Alex is there for 12 minutes before she leaves. We look at her actions when she came back. She told the police her brother was hit in the head with a bat. She never asks how he is. She's not concerned about his injury. She's not concerned about her husband being dead on the floor of her house, her child now without a father. The lack of words that she said there and her demeanor show again that she was well aware of what was going on and part of this incident. We look at her words to Chad, that Charles changed his life insurance policy before we got rid of him. They show her intent to kill Charles. And again, we look at the motive, money and Chad. When did this happen? The first time Charles came back into town after he found out about the affair. Finally, the state has to prove that the defendant or the co-conspirator acted with premeditation. So I'm going to talk to you about premeditation. You have a jury instruction for it, and it tells you that the defendant or the co-conspirator intended to kill another human being or knew she or the co-conspirator would kill another human being, and that after forming that intent or knowledge reflected on the decision before killing. It is this reflection, regardless of the length of time in which it occurs, that distinguishes first-degree murder from second-degree murder. You're also told an act is not done with premeditation if it is the instant effect of a sudden quarrel or heat of passion. It's where you remember those 12 minutes and the calmness of her walking around with that phone and her demeanor. You're told the time needed for reflection is not necessarily prolonged, and the space of time between the intent or knowledge to kill and the act of killing may be very short. So I'm going to give you an example. It's a lot of legalese, and then we'll talk about what we really have here. So imagine again, you are driving your car. You do every day, and you're coming up to an intersection and you see the light turn yellow. And in that second you think, do I want to run it? Or do I want to slam on my brakes and hit it? Stop before I go into the intersection. You think about that, and then you decide, I'm going to slam on my brakes, and I'm going to stop. That is the time it takes to reflect. That is the time it takes for premeditation. But we have a lot more than this because we have planning, not just premeditation that morning. So when we talk about the premeditation that we see...
Still with us, attorney, former prosecutor Tommy Pope. Tommy, I am liking the way she's bringing it back all the way to really the most important point from my perspective, which was first-degree conspiracy to commit first-degree murder because of the premeditation, because of the planning. I think she really got her steam rolling and is now just handing it to the jury.
I think she's there. I think she's hit the spots as we talked before last break. And, it's, again, tough case. You don't have the co-conspirators and you don't have the statements of co-conspirators to use back and forth, which is normally in most of the conspiracy trials, that's the greatest advantage of charging conspiracy. But I think, if they hang on anything, it's just going to be pure reasonable doubt, and whether you can get over that knowing you really can't know everything that happened, even though I thought the walking on the beach example was good. You didn't see what happened, but you know what happened to a reasonable degree of certainty, or in this case, beyond reasonable doubt. So I look forward to seeing how Lori's going to refute it, but I know we won't make that this hour. It doesn't look like.
Well, I agree, but we are going to be bringing it to all of our viewers. And, I think the thing with this for me, Tommy, too, is sometimes there's no other reasonable explanation. That's what circumstantial evidence does. There's nothing else that could reasonably have occurred except for this. Let me ask you, though, about Lori, because here's the thing that I think might be hard for her. She did not testify, so a lot of what she knows or may want to say may not be evidence before the court, so she can't argue it in closing. So I think it's going to be hard for her to stand up to make an argument based on only the evidence presented, where she may have other things she wants to say, number one. Number two, if you're the prosecutor, are you quick to object if it's something not in evidence?
Normally, the kind of unspoken rule is, if you and I were trying a case, unless you're really going far afield, I'm not going to object. You kind of leave it there. I worry exactly like you said, which brings me to why I think she should have testified, because at least she'd have all this out there, and it would be in evidence for better or worse. But I think the prosecutor's probably going to be primed. It's a delicate balance. I always talk about, when you and Michael and I talk, we want to see the jurors' faces to see how they're reacting to me constantly objecting and stopping what is in essence testifying without cross-examination.
And the state did object quite a bit. I agree with you. Why don't you think she testified? I just want to dig into that a little more, because I fully expected her to.
I think I did too, Judge. I think that, she does have counsel that is at least advising her. I'm sure they talked about, the potential for cross-examination. You're also looking at what prior bad acts may come in. I'm sure they tried to work through that in voir dire, but the truth is she's got convicted of some very heinous crimes independently of this.
Yeah, and that cross-examination can be hard for a defendant. Thank you, as always, Tommy Pope, for joining us with your great expertise.